Hi, this is Anna from Post Me a Book. Today I'm going to talk about two books that I read not so long ago. I probably finished them about a week and a half ago. And I did make videos, I did make clips about these two books, but unfortunately, my phone, the microphone has died, and then I tried on a different one, and of course I managed to get the whole clip the wrong side up. That's to say, it was vertical instead of horizontal, so I'm truly hoping this one's going to be horizontal, because it takes such a long time between videos. I completely forget which way the camera should be facing. So let's hope this works. Now I also hope that this iPad has enough storage so that this video actually works, because I felt I really must get something out now. It's been so long. So let me get right to it, because my videos tend to be so long anyway, so I'm going to make a real attempt to shorten this. So, starting with the first book. This one was called, let's see if you can see it, there's a bit of glare here. It's in Swedish. The book is actually called Go Where the Heart Leads You. It was written by Susanna Tamaro, and it was originally in Italian. Well, I get why people do this in the daylight. Trying to get the lighting right without proper lighting is not easy. But anyway, getting back to the book. So this is a story about a grandmother who's writing a diary to her granddaughter. We find out that the grandmother is called Olga, but we find this out somewhere near the end of the book, and it almost seems by chance. Somewhere along the line, her dad, or let's call him her father, mentions her name, and that's the only time we get to know that she's called Olga. So Olga is writing to her granddaughter, and at the start of the book we find out that Olga is actually dying. She's been diagnosed with some illness and she hasn't got long to live, quite simply. Her granddaughter doesn't know, and she and her granddaughter left on not the best of terms. Is this upside down? It is even upside down. And her granddaughter left for America. And because they left on not the best of terms, she never told her granddaughter. And I think she isn't, even in these diaries or these letters. Oh no, in this diary, it is diaries. She doesn't actually tell her granddaughter that she's dying. But she mentions things like, perhaps when you come back I'll no longer be here. She's 85, so that, within reason, could be just because she doesn't know when her granddaughter's coming back. She hasn't received any news from her granddaughter since she went to America. So she writes this diary to explain her own life, because these are things that they never actually talked about, and to explain to her granddaughter why things turned out the way they were. That's to say, why she behaved, the grandmother, Olga, why she behaved the way she did when she and her granddaughter had a falling out. Because she explains that she tries to be kind of liberal without clipping her granddaughter's wings, and also trying to let her granddaughter find herself. She didn't want to try and stop her from leaving for America. So the book starts off with Olga talking about how her granddaughter came to live with her. Her granddaughter was only 4 years old, and Olga's daughter had died, and that's when her granddaughter came to her. And how in the beginning, before her granddaughter had come, she was alone, and she hadn't got much to look forward to, so she had fallen into a kind of depression. And she mentions to her granddaughter that it was because of you that I managed to find new life. So she wants her granddaughter to really appreciate that she was really grateful that she came into her life. And she also goes on to explain how her life was as a child. She was an only child, and her parents were, as they were strict. She also explains that even though her parents were strict, and even if it wasn't a cozy childhood as such, sometimes some of these things can be seen in context. That's to say, it's just the way life was. It's what she's trying to say to her granddaughter. Sometimes things in context, you're not excusing them, but you appreciate that some things are the way they were because of the times, the culture that they were living in at the time. And this upbringing, she realized a bit later on in life, had affected her. It wasn't as she was growing up, she didn't necessarily ponder about it. It was just later in life that she realized that how this had perhaps changed her course of life. Because at the beginning of the book, she also explains that she was someone who avoided men. She wasn't really interested in them. She was really she enjoyed reading, she enjoyed educating herself, and she felt that if she couldn't find someone who was willing to let her continue with her education, or let her continue with reading her lives and advancing her mind, then she wasn't interested whatsoever. But at about the time of, I don't know, about 20 or 22 in Olga's life, she was getting to a point where she was thinking she was going to die an old maid. As it seems in those days, by 22 you're an old maid if you're not married. But anyway, so she was worried about this. But as it was, things change, and she actually meets someone, and she does get married to someone who she felt was the one, who was going to allow her to continue her education, her educating her own mind. She wasn't in any kind of formal education, but she liked to be able to advance her own mind, allow her to read books and that kind of thing. And she's putting across to her granddaughter, and she's trying to explain to her daughter this life that she never got round to telling her granddaughter about. And she also explains that even during marriage, it wasn't quite what she had hoped for. She had such big plans as when it came to marrying this man, but it didn't turn out the way she hoped it would be. Instead, she reached a point where death she felt would be better than the life she was living. And I think part of the reason she tells her granddaughter all these things is just because she wants her to appreciate that sometimes in life you don't always see things ahead of time. You don't know what's going to happen. You hop into things and then they turn out differently. And that's what happened to Olga. During that time when she was married to this man, and her life had taken a completely different turn from what she thought it would. She had given up all hope of things getting better. But then came the war, and she returned home to her parents. All this, they live in Italy, I should say, which I hadn't appreciated actually until about the middle of the book, but they're living in Italy. And the war came along, and she returned to her parents, and so did her husband, because when she married, she moved to a different part of Italy with her husband. And then her life took a different turn altogether, and it actually did an upward swing. And this is the point where Olga realizes that happiness, because she had given up on happiness, but she truly found happiness during a period and time in her life and total joy, and she realized that if only, and she thought, okay, things are now going to turn around. And then things take a downward turn. So she's gone from up to down to up and then down again. Again, trying to let her granddaughter appreciate that life has its ups and downs. And somewhere along the line, she has a daughter, but she and her daughter did not always see eye to eye. And then that she also felt was an up when it happened, and then she had another down. So it was a continuous up and down in her life. And she was also trying to explain to her granddaughter that she hadn't realized that life had been tough for generations of women in her family, but they didn't realize it was just something they accepted and they moved on. So with the ups and the downs and the ups and the downs, then came her granddaughter. So that was another up. What she didn't have with her own daughter, she tried to give to her granddaughter. She put in her love and time and they became a whole new partnership. They quarreled, but they also made up. And she tries to point out to her granddaughter that even even with these quarrels, that is also part of life. But you can't quite give up. Life has its hurdles, it has its barriers, keep on you have to keep on going on, is what she's trying to tell her granddaughter, because her own life, she's had ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. And even when the times when she was down in the depths, she still managed to come back up. Her message to her granddaughter, in part, what her life was about, what the things were that made her make certain choices. But she's also trying to impart that perhaps if she hadn't made certain choices and she'd followed her own heart, perhaps life would have been different. But she also appreciates this is a perhaps, she doesn't know. But she still thinks that, especially the time when she had that happiness, if only she had done that instead of doing the other, perhaps her life would have been different. So she's trying to tell her granddaughter is that at the end of it, when you're at a crossroads, take the time to sit down or take a pause and consider what your options are. But at the end of it, follow your heart wherever it takes you. That's the book in a nutshell. It's not a long book. It's only 190 pages. But I did love this book actually, because for me it was a very easy read. I felt, I have to say, I did feel what I think the author was trying to convey. I think at the end of it is when, if you come to a point in your life where sometimes you've had sorrows or you've lost someone, and you start thinking, well, I should have asked them this, I should have asked them that, I should have done this, that and the other when they were still alive, or something like that. I think this book is trying to convey some of this, that that the grandmother doesn't want to have these regrets, that she should have taught her granddaughter this, and so that her granddaughter knows these things, even if she isn't going to be there, perhaps, when her grandmother dies. So she doesn't want to, Olga doesn't want to be left with these regrets of not having told her granddaughter about following her heart, or explaining why things turned out the way they did, and explaining why she acted the way she did. I was completely immersed in this book. I really felt as though Olga was there telling me the story. So that's what I truly loved about this book, and it was such an easy read, but it was so emotional for me, or so emotional is perhaps an exaggeration, but I had the empathy, definitely, to feel what Olga was trying to impart, that it didn't even feel as though I was reading a book. So I would highly recommend this to anyone. So that was that book. The other book I read is called, also no, it's not upside down, Amin and the Tragedy of Uganda. I think for you it's back to front, but there you go. This was also an old book. This is written in 1979. Old book. And it's about Amin. Amin was a president and dictator of Uganda from about 67, I think it was. Was it 67? 67? No, perhaps 69 actually. To late 70s. This book is no longer in publication, and it's actually published by a German publisher. It's written by Semakula Kiwanuka. It tells the story of Amin and how he came into power, and it also charts out some of a part of the history of Uganda during that period, because before Amin there was Obote who was president, And anyone who knows part of the story about Amin, he killed a lot of Ugandans, or he had a lot of Ugandans killed, or during his time. Apart from him killing Ugandans, during his time, the military and the secret police killed a lot of people, both those in government and ordinary people. They pretty much did what they wanted, with the means allowing it. He managed to come into power by a coup that overthrew Obote. Obote had also killed a lot of Ugandans. Uganda is divided up, or was divided up, I should say, by different tribes, but is now a united country. But it still has its divisions because different tribes have their princesses and their prince and princesses and kings and queens, and it was a case of who should rule, who should have the power. So it, according to the book, Amin used this divisions by the different people to forge his way, and he played one against the other, or not necessarily played one against the other, but he sort of chose one group, or he chose one group at a time. And according to the author, the reason why he managed to get away with killing a lot of people, because the author means that the other tribes would sort of think, or even people, it's not just tribes, but different people would think that, well, he's not doing it to our tribe, or he's not doing it to our religion, or something like that. So it was always a case, it's them, not us. So nobody helped people who were being killed as such. There wasn't enough of, it's strange, because when you read this book, and it's of course not all the histories in this book, but when you read this book, you still get surprised by the fact that this was happening, that people in government, because Amin seemed to, it didn't matter who you were. You could be his best friend one moment, or not his best friend, but let's say he's working for him and he'll be buddies with you kind of thing, and then the next day he's killing you. So what always surprised me is that even when this was going on, people would still work for Amin. It just seems crazy. It's a bit like, you know that one minute he can be working with you quite happily, and the next day he's killing you because you've upset him by something or other. But still, of course, it's not as easy as all that, and it's not as black and white as I'm trying to make it sound. Of course, I don't have all the facts. But anyway, to talk about the books. So the book itself charts Amin's rise to power and why it happened. And it talks about the different factions, different tribes, different religions, and how Amin chose to pick on the different religions. Amin came from the north, so he was at the time promoting the northerners, while the south had people like the Uganda who were a strong political group at the time, and they were hoping to get back into power, which Obote had taken from them. And Amin had kind of given them a kind of hint that, yep, now I'm here, things will get better for you. So the Uganda were hoping that they'll get back into power when Amin came into power, but this wasn't the case. So they quickly realized, well, not so quickly, but through time they realized this is not going to happen. And Amin manages to get the people who backing him surrounding him. So his backers were there surrounding him with he didn't really have any strong affiliation apart from with the northerners. He just chose the winning group, the ones who would help him keep power. And the strange thing about Amin, or perhaps not the strange thing, the other thing that comes up in the book is the thing that Amin managed to fool Western countries. In the beginning he was supported by Israel, he was supported by the British, and the Israelites, at some point he just showed them that they weren't welcome anymore. And the British were happily keeping him and helping him keep power because it served their purpose. So it also shows that the countries just use countries just to serve their own purpose. The British decided to turn a blind eye or say that no, there are no killings going on. And it wasn't until Amin started killing British citizens that they also started thinking, okay, this is not on. So then they pull out, and foreign governments realize that Amin wasn't the man they thought he was. In the beginning, he had them all surrounding him, giving him all their support. He wasn't an educated man, but what he lacked in education, he had in smarts. So in the beginning, I think everybody was thinking that they could have him as a puppet because he was not educated. And instead of realizing it, that in the end he was a megalomaniac. So things in the end went south for Amin. People realized that he was not the man they thought he was. So foreign governments started backing out, and Amin got desperate. And in the end, he was overthrown, but this wasn't before he had killed many people. He had left, right, and centre. People have lost their families just because he was worried about what they could do, or he was worried or they had said something wrong. And then the secret police he let the police or the military do what they want. So they were a law unto themselves. It really was a tragedy, and because of there was much that Uganda had that it lost during his time. They had a good university, they had a relatively good economy. Throughout the Indians, they had a lot of business affairs in Uganda, and then he gave it to his cronies. So things like that. Amin's era was a tragedy, not just because of the people who died, but also because of the ruin that he left Uganda in. And this one, it took me a long time to read this book, actually. I think I started at the beginning of the year, but I'm not been reading it day to day, but it took me a long time. But it is also a very easy book to read. It was very informative, so I'm glad I finally got around to reading all of it. I think perhaps because it's a factual book, it takes longer because you want to remember what you've read. So that was Amin and the Tragedy of Uganda. That's another one I would recommend, but as I said, this one's out of publication. I've seen that you can actually borrow this book there's a library in Germany. I think it's the one up there. Can't read this because it's in German, but there's a library in Germany where you can actually find this book. But anyway, book worth reading, well recommended. And those are the two books that I've read. No, I actually did read another. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, finally, by Maya Angelou. And this one, well, I don't really think I need to talk about it. I would have to say it was also a very good book. This was another one that I sort of didn't realize when I started reading this book that it was an autobiography, and I was thinking, how did these writers manage to write a book as though you're the one who's in the story? And then I read the back and I realized that this is actually an autobiography. The thing that I regret is that a lot of these books, albeit not very old, well, this one is 1930s, not very old, but old enough, is that the authors have died. And I regret actually that I'm reading these books now, because I would have liked to read a book where the author's still alive. But anyway, the good thing is that there are a lot of video clips where the author talks. So I can watch video clips about Maya Angelou. And I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I will perhaps do it another video clip, because otherwise this will become too long. So thank you for watching. Until next time.